She stood at the counter, her small hands trembling as she tried to return a bottle of milk she couldn't afford. Milk she had hoped to buy for 2 newborn puppies, shivering in the cold. The cashier gave her a sympathetic look, but rules were rules. From the back of the store, a man in a worn navy jacket watched quietly. His name was Jack Thorne, a former Navy SEAL who had once saved countless lives on the battlefield. The little girl had no idea that what he was about to do next would change her life forever. Before we begin this story, tell me where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss what happens next. Snow fell in thin, whispering sheets over the quiet Montana morning. The air was sharp enough to bite, and the light spilling through the glass doors of Morrison's corner store seemed like the only warmth left in town. Inside, the faint hum of a refrigerator mixed with the smell of instant coffee and wet boots. Behind the counter stood Mrs. Albright, a heavy-set woman with soft eyes and hands always smelling of soap. She watched as a small girl pushed open the door, shaking snow from her sleeves. Emma Carter, 12 years old, was too thin for the winter. Her hair, a tangled brown curtain, clung to her flushed cheeks. The coat she wore had a broken zipper and sleeves rolled up twice to fit her small frame. In her hands, she clutched a few crumpled bills and coins, their edges damp from the snow. She walked with a mix of determination and embarrassment, as if afraid someone might notice the trembling in her fingers. She stopped at the refrigerated section and stared at the rows of milk cartons. Her reflection in the glass looked back, tired, older than her years. She counted the coins again, whispering to herself like a prayer. 1, 2, $3.40, 6. Her voice cracked on the last number. She reached for the smallest carton of milk, enough to last maybe 2 days, and walked to the counter. Mrs. Albright gave her a gentle smile. "Morning, sweetheart. Cold day, isn't it?" Emma nodded. "Just this, please." When Mrs. Albright scanned the barcode, the register beeped softly. "That'll be $4.09. Emma's heart sank. Her eyes darted to the door, to the floor, then back to the coins. I don't have that much," she whispered. "Can you maybe just take what I have? I can come back with the rest next week." The woman hesitated, her kind eyes flickering toward the small no credit sign taped to the register. Rules were rules. "I'm sorry, honey," she said gently. "I can't do that. Store policy." Emma nodded quickly, blinking fast to keep the tears from spilling. "It's okay. I'll bring it back." Her voice was small but steady, the voice of a child used to disappointment. She set the milk on the counter and pushed it back toward the clerk, her hands trembling slightly. From the back of the store, a man's voice carried quietly through the aisle. "Let her keep it." No one turned at first. The voice was deep, calm, the kind that didn't need to shout to be heard. Jack Thorne stood by the coffee rack, one gloved hand resting on a thermos. He was in his late 30s, tall and broad-shouldered, with a posture that seemed carved from discipline. A faint scar traced down his right temple, disappearing into a short beard dusted with gray. His eyes, a pale, watchful blue, carried the weight of deserts and oceans he'd rather forget. He wore a worn Navy field jacket, the kind that had seen storms and gunfire. And his boots left wet prints shaped like purpose. Jack had been a Navy SEAL for 16 years before a mission in Syria cost him 2 teammates and part of his hearing in one ear. Since then, silence and guilt had followed him like shadows. Mrs. Albright blinked. "Jack Thorne, I can't just—" But he was already walking toward the counter, his steps even. "Put it on my tab." He pulled out a folded $10 bill, set it on the counter, and nodded toward Emma. "Keep the change." Emma turned toward him, startled. "Sir, you don't have to—" "I know," he interrupted softly, meeting her eyes. But you need to. The girl hesitated, clutching the milk to her chest like a treasure. Thank you, she said quietly, then turned and hurried out before anyone could say more. The bell above the door jingled once, then was swallowed by the snow. Jack watched her go. Through the frosted glass, he saw her small figure crossing the street, disappearing around the corner that led toward the old industrial blocks on the edge of town. Something about the way she moved, quick, purposeful, but limping slightly, caught his attention. Most kids her age would have run home to warmth. She was heading somewhere colder. He stood for a moment, the silence of the store pressing on him like an old memory. 16 years of following orders had trained him to recognize when something wasn't right. That instinct, the same one that had once saved lives, whispered now, "Follow her." Outside, the snow thickened, coating his jacket in a film of white. Jack adjusted his collar and stepped into the wind, his breath fogging the air. He didn't know the girl's story, not yet, but there was a look in her eyes he'd seen before. The same look soldiers wore when they'd already lost too much but refused to surrender. The tracks of her small boots led through the slush, past the church, down toward the abandoned railway where no one went anymore. Jack followed at a distance, his boots crunching softly in the snow. Somewhere ahead, faint and distant, he thought he heard the cry of a dog. He didn't know it yet, but that sound, that fragile, pleading sound in the snow, was about to change both their lives forever. The wind was rising as Jack followed the faint tracks of Emma's boots. They led him past the rusted railroad fence, through an overgrown yard, to a derelict house leaning against the snow like an exhausted soldier. Its roof sagged in the middle, and the front door hung crooked, tapping softly in the wind. Jack hesitated for a moment, his breath fogging before him. A single cry, thin, trembling, broke through the silence. A puppy. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The air smelled of dust and cold metal. Faint light filtered through a cracked window, illuminating the small figure of Emma Carter, kneeling beside an old blanket spread on the floor. Her small hands trembled as she poured the milk she'd bought earlier into a shallow bowl. The liquid was thin, half water, half hope. Beside her lay a German shepherd, her fur a patchwork of faded gold and black, ribs showing through her coat. The dog's eyes were clouded but gentle, filled with the kind of loyalty that didn't need words. 2 tiny puppies, barely a week old, whimpered against her belly, trying to nurse though she had no milk left to give. Jack crouched low, his voice steady. "Easy there. I'm not here to hurt anyone." Emma looked up sharply, her eyes wide but not afraid. She remembered the man from the store, tall, with the weary stillness of someone used to danger. "You followed me." He nodded once. "I heard the puppies." For a moment, they just watched each other. Then, as if deciding he could be trusted, Emma turned back to the dog and stroked her muzzle. "Her name's Shadow," she said softly. "She used to work with my dad. He was a K-9 handler in the Navy." The name hit Jack like a spark in cold water. He knew the look of a retired service dog, the way their eyes never stopped scanning the room, how they stiffened at sudden sounds. Shadow fit the image perfectly, though her body was frail with age. "Your dad," he said carefully. "Was he Daniel Carter?" Emma nodded. "You knew him." Jack exhaled, lowering himself beside her. "Not personally, but I knew of him. He was a good man, saved lives during the Miramar flood mission. We heard about it even overseas." The girl's lips trembled. "They said he drowned trying to save his team." Jack nodded again. He remembered the military report, a man who refused to leave until everyone else was safe. He'd thought it was just another story among many. But now, seeing this girl and the half-starved dog, the sacrifice felt heavier. "Where's your mom, Emma?" "She died when I was 5. Car accident. After he was gone, I was supposed to get help from the Veterans Assistance Office. They sent money for a while. Then it just stopped." She spoke quietly, without anger, just a tired acceptance that hurt more than rage. They said the paperwork was wrong, that maybe Dad wasn't really on the active list when he... Her voice cracked. "But he was. I have his medals." Jack felt his jaw tighten. Bureaucracy had broken more families than war ever did. "How long have you been here?" "A few weeks," she said. "Shadow was pregnant. We couldn't go to the shelter. They said they don't take dogs like her. Not old ones. Not military ones." She smiled faintly, a fragile thing that barely reached her eyes. "So we stayed. I sell bottles and cans for food. Sometimes people give me leftovers." Jack looked around. The house was empty, except for a broken chair, a pile of blankets, and a small camping stove. Yet it was tidy, the kind of order that comes from someone trying desperately to make chaos feel like home. He noticed a small photograph taped to the wall, a young man in uniform, tall and lean, smiling beside a younger version of Shadow. Sergeant Daniel Carter. "You're taking care of them on your own?" Jack asked quietly. Emma nodded. "Shadow's all I have left of him." The old dog raised her head at the sound of her name, her tail giving one slow wag. Jack reached out, letting the dog sniff his hand before scratching gently behind her ear. The shepherd pressed closer, trusting him almost instantly. Dogs like her always recognized their own kind, even in humans. "You've done good, kid," Jack murmured, "but she needs real food, real care. She won't make it on watered milk." Emma's shoulders slumped. "I know, but I don't have anywhere else to go. The neighbors already complained once. If they call social services, they'll take Shadow away." Jack felt something tighten in his chest. There was fear in her voice, but beneath it, a kind of fierce love, the same kind he'd seen in men who'd carried wounded brothers across battlefields. He rose slowly, brushing the dust from his knees. "All right," he said, voice low but firm. "You and Shadow stay put tonight. I'll come back in the morning with food and blankets." Emma looked up, uncertain. "Why would you help us?" Jack met her gaze. "Because someone once helped me when I didn't deserve it. Guess I owe the world a favor." He walked toward the door, then paused. "Lock it from the inside. It's getting colder." Outside, the snow had started again, thick and quiet, falling in heavy flakes that softened even the sharp edges of the broken world. Jack pulled his collar up, glancing once more at the cracked window where a small face watched him go. Behind her, the shadow of a shepherd moved slowly, protectively. He whispered to the night, more to himself than anyone else. "You're not alone anymore, kid." The next morning dawned pale and silent, the kind of cold that crept into bones rather than skin. Jack arrived at the old house with 2 paper bags, one filled with canned dog food, the other with groceries. His breath curled in the air as he knocked. Inside, Emma's footsteps shuffled across the wooden floor before she opened the door, her hair tangled from sleep, her face streaked with the faint dust of the night before. "Morning," Jack said simply. "I brought breakfast." Emma blinked, half surprised he'd kept his promise. "Shadow's better," she said softly. She wagged her tail when the sun came up. Inside, the air was warmer thanks to the small camping stove. The shepherd mother, Shadow, lifted her head and barked once in recognition. The 2 puppies wriggled near her belly, tiny bundles of fur and life. Jack crouched beside them, feeding the mother from his hand, his gloved fingers brushing her muzzle gently. "You're tougher than most soldiers I know," he murmured. While Emma ate, Jack examined the room. His military-trained eye caught the small details most would ignore. A pile of neatly folded clothes, a flashlight with fading batteries, and an envelope half-tucked beneath a cracked wooden box. It looked official, stamped with the insignia of the Department of Veterans Affairs. He pulled it closer. The envelope was addressed not to Emma Carter, but to Emily C. Dalton. Wrong name, same building code, same street. He frowned. Inside was a printed notice. Claim denied. Verification of dependent unconfirmed. In red ink, someone had scribbled, "Returned to sender." Jack's jaw tightened. Bureaucratic incompetence didn't make him angry. Corruption did. He studied the stamp date, nearly 2 months ago. "Emma," he said carefully, "did anyone from the Veterans Office ever visit you?" She shook her head, chewing a small piece of bread. "They sent papers, but the man who used to help my dad, Mr. Hawkins, he stopped calling after the funeral." Jack's gaze flicked to a dusty corner where a folded American flag rested in a frame. "Do you still have your dad's documents?" Emma reached under a stack of blankets and pulled out a small metal box, her father's old military footlocker, now scratched and faded. Inside were medals, certificates, and photographs. Daniel Carter in his uniform, arms slung around teammates, his grin bright against desert sand. Beneath the photos lay letters, most of them unopened. Jack picked one up, the return address printed in a neat, bureaucratic font. Veterans Assistance Bureau, Washington, D.C. But the postmark didn't match. "This was mailed from Chicago," he muttered. "What does that mean?" Emma asked. "It means," Jack said, sliding the letter into his pocket, "someone's rerouting official correspondence. Your father's benefits were never processed. They were stolen." Emma looked confused. "Stolen? But who would do that?" "The same kind of men who'd let a soldier's kid freeze in an empty house," Jack replied, his voice low, simmering with restrained fury. That afternoon, he drove into town and parked outside Montana Diner, a small roadside cafe where the coffee was cheap, but the gossip reliable. Inside, the owner, Diane Pierce, a tall woman in her 40s with dark red hair tied in a bun, was cleaning tables. She had a sharp wit and sharper instincts, a widow of a state trooper killed in the line of duty. "Jack Thorne," she said, spotting him, "didn't expect to see you out of your cave this early." He smiled faintly. "Got a question for you, Diane. You still know people over at the VA branch in Helena?" She raised an eyebrow. "Depends who's asking." "Someone trying to fix a mistake." Her expression softened a little. She poured him coffee. "You're still trying to save the world one case at a time, huh?" "Not the world," Jack said, stirring the cup absently. "Just one kid and a dog." He slid the envelope across the counter. "Ever seen that name before? Emily C. Dalton?" Diane frowned, adjusting her reading glasses. "No, but that's the wrong routing code. See here?" She tapped the printed digits. "That's Chicago's code, not Helena's. Whoever processed this, they rerouted it out of state. You're looking at something deeper than a typo." Jack's instincts prickled. "You know anyone in Chicago who could dig around?" "Maybe," she said, lowering her voice. "There's a guy, Marcus Vega. Used to be in the Bureau, now runs private investigations. Doesn't come cheap, but he hates dirty officials more than he loves money. He owes me a favor." Jack nodded. "Get me his number." By evening, Jack sat in his truck, snow settling on the windshield as he spoke to Marcus over the phone. The man's voice was rough, tinged with Chicago grit. "Yeah, I remember Daniel Carter. I was the one who processed his benefits application years ago. His name got flagged last spring. Someone in DC reclassified him as inactive. Paper trail disappears after that, but I've been watching the reroutes. Who's behind it? Jack asked. Guy named Gregory Shaw, Marcus said, head of the regional finance division. He's been approving fake accounts, redirecting checks to shell addresses. If your soldier's kid lost her benefits, chances are Shaw signed off on it. Jack's hand tightened on the steering wheel. Can you prove it? Give me 2 days, Marcus replied. But be careful, Thorne. Shaw's protected. He's not some pencil pusher. Word is he's got people who make problems disappear. Jack hung up and stared out at the snow-thick night. In the rearview mirror, the world blurred into white, but in his mind everything sharpened. There was a line between justice and survival, and he'd crossed it before. This time, though, it wasn't for a mission. It was for a girl with a box of medals and a dog named Shadow. Night had swallowed the town whole. The streets of Helena were buried under a curtain of white, each snowflake falling like an erased secret. Jack Thorne sat inside his rusted Ford truck, the engine idling low, his breath fogging the windshield. On the seat beside him lay a small digital recorder, a camera with a telephoto lens, and a worn military knife. Old habits from old wars. He had promised himself he'd never run covert ops again, but promises were luxuries for men who slept well. Jack hadn't slept well in years. Across the street stood a brick building marked Veterans Aid Office, Regional Administration. Its windows glowed faintly through the storm. Inside, lights still burned, though it was past midnight. Jack lifted the camera and focused through the falling snow. Behind the glass, he saw a tall man pacing, a figure with the smooth arrogance of someone who'd never been caught. Gregory Shaw was in his early 50s, impeccably dressed in a gray suit that fit too perfectly, to be honest. His face was narrow, his jaw sharp but soft from privilege, and his hair slicked back with the precision of vanity. Shaw's eyes, pale and cold, betrayed nothing but calculation. He had built his career by stepping on the names of dead soldiers, siphoning their benefits while giving speeches about service and honor. To Jack, he looked less like a man and more like a parasite that had learned to wear a tie. Target confirmed, Jack whispered into his earpiece. On the other end, Marcus Vega's voice crackled through. Copy that. I got eyes on his assistant leaving through the back, female, mid-30s, name's Lydia Carr. She handles his transfers. Jack adjusted his gloves. She clean? Too clean, Marcus replied. She's been moving digital ledgers every Thursday night. You get what we need, and the feds will have a paper trail long enough to hang him twice. Jack glanced toward the passenger seat, where Shadow, the aging shepherd, sat upright, ears pricked. Her fur shimmered faintly in the dashboard light, her muzzle gray with age, but her posture sharp as a sentinel's. She had insisted on coming. Emma had cried when he left, but Shadow had followed anyway, resting her head against his knee as if to say, You saved her father's name. Let me save yours. Jack smiled faintly. All right, partner. Showtime. He stepped out into the storm, snow crunching under his boots. Moving along the alley wall, he reached the service entrance of the building. The old lock was easy, one twist, one push. Inside, fluorescent light hummed above rows of filing cabinets. Jack's footsteps were silent, his every motion calculated, muscle memory from missions that no longer existed on paper. He reached Shaw's office door. Voices drifted through, the clipped tone of Shaw and another hesitant feminine. Lydia. I told you, she was saying, her voice trembling slightly. The wire transfers don't match. Someone's going to notice. Shaw's reply was calm, almost indulgent. Then you'll make them match. And if anyone asks, tell them the Chicago branch requested reclassification. You worry too much, Lydia. I'm not paid to go to prison. You're not paid to think either, Shaw snapped, his voice slicing the air. Jack pressed a recorder against the door, catching every word. Then he took 1 photo, 2, 3, each flash invisible behind the snowed-over windows. He waited until Shaw poured himself a drink and dismissed the woman. Lydia left through the hallway, her heels tapping like heartbeats. Jack stepped out of the shadows just long enough to see her face. A pale woman with tired eyes, lipstick smudged from nervous habits. She wasn't evil, just trapped. Shaw's kind always used fear better than guns. Jack slipped into the office. Shaw was on the phone, laughing softly. "Relax, the audit's a formality. By next week I'll be on a plane to Miami." "Not tonight," Jack said quietly. Shaw froze, turning toward the voice. The sight of the man before him, the broad frame, the sharp blue eyes, made him drop the glass. "Who the hell?" Jack held up his badge. "An old Navy credential. You stole from soldiers' families, from children. You think that's paperwork? That's betrayal." Shaw sneered. "You're no cop. You've got nothing." "Oh, I've got enough." Jack tossed a flash drive onto the desk. "Copies of your wire logs, your shell accounts, and your signature on every falsified claim. Marcus Vega sends his regards." For the first time, Shaw's arrogance cracked. "You don't understand. This money, it's just numbers. No one gets hurt." Jack took a step closer, his voice low and steady. "Tell that to the girl eating cold bread while your company dines in D.C. Outside, sirens began to wail, faint through the snowstorm. Marcus had called it in. Shaw's face turned pale. "You called the police? You can't prove—" Before he could finish, Shadow growled from the doorway. Shaw flinched, stepping back, his knees hitting the desk. The sound of tires screeched outside, 2 squad cars stopping fast. Jack didn't move. "You're done, Shaw." The door burst open. Detective Lena Morris, a tall black woman with cropped hair and a no-nonsense stare, entered with 2 officers behind her. Her coat dripped melting snow, her badge glinting. "Thorne," she said, half grinning, "you sure know how to pick your nights." "Couldn't sleep," Jack replied. Lena turned to Shaw. "Gregory Shaw, you're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and obstruction of justice. You have the right to remain silent, though I doubt you'll use it." As she read him his rights, Shaw stared at Jack with a mix of fury and disbelief. "You'll regret this. Men like me end up in men like you's prisons," Jack finished. Outside, as the police led Shaw away, snow continued to fall, thicker now, blanketing the city like a cleansing shroud. Shadow stood beside Jack, her head lifted toward the flashing lights. Lena exhaled. "You know, for a retired guy, you still make more noise than half my department." Jack smiled faintly. "Sometimes the quiet ones have the loudest ghosts." He looked toward the dark sky. Somewhere, in a small house at the edge of town, a little girl was sleeping with her dogs, unaware that her father's name, and her future, had just been restored. The first light of morning spilled over the pine trees, turning the frost on the window into rivers of gold. A month had passed since that long night in Helena, the night when justice had finally found its way through the snow. Jack Thorne now lived in a cabin at the edge of Bitterroot Valley, a small, sturdy home built of old timber and second chances. Smoke curled from the chimney, carrying the scent of coffee and pine sap. It was quiet here, the kind of quiet that didn't ache anymore. On the porch sat Emma Carter, wrapped in a faded blue blanket that nearly swallowed her small frame. Her hair, longer now, caught the light like strands of copper. In her arms, one of the shepherd puppies squirmed, nipping at her sleeves while the other chased a falling leaf across the deck. Their mother, Shadow, rested nearby, eyes half closed, her once weak body restored by warmth, food, and love. The old dog's muzzle had gone silver. but she held herself with the quiet dignity of a soldier at peace. Inside the cabin, Jack stood at the counter, pouring coffee into 2 mismatched mugs. His reflection in the window was that of a man transformed, still rugged, still marked by old battles, but with a softness that hadn't been there before. The faint scar on his temple caught the light, a reminder of what he'd survived and what he'd chosen to protect. He wore a gray flannel shirt rolled to the elbows, revealing forearms lined with small scars, each one a memory. The cabin was simple but alive. Photos hung on the wall, one of Sergeant Daniel Carter, framed next to a folded flag, another of Emma laughing with the puppies, and a third of a group of children gathered around a sign that read, "The Daniel Carter Foundation, a home for heroes' children." That sign had been Jack's idea. After the investigation, when the government offered him an award and compensation, he refused the money but asked for something else: the creation of a trust fund to support the children of fallen veterans. Bureaucracy had fought him, of course. It always did. But Detective Lena Morris had gone on record vouching for his case. Within weeks, the Daniel Carter Foundation was born, and Emma became its first resident. Jack stepped outside, handing her a mug of hot cocoa instead of coffee. "You'll stunt your growth if you start drinking the real stuff too early," he teased. Emma smiled, hugging the mug with both hands. "Shadow says I'm already grown up." Jack leaned against the railing. "Shadow says a lot of things. Most of them involve food." The old dog lifted her head as if understanding, giving a short bark that sounded suspiciously like agreement. Emma giggled, and the sound filled the porch like music. Jack looked out at the horizon, where the mountains caught fire in the dawn. "You know," he said quietly, "when I was your age, I thought soldiers were supposed to save the world." Emma tilted her head. "And now?" He took a slow sip. "Now I think we're just supposed to save the pieces we can." She nodded solemnly, the kind of nod only a child who had seen too much could give. "Like Dad did?" Jack smiled. "Exactly like your dad did." A car approached on the gravel road, its tires crunching softly. The sound didn't startle anyone. Life here no longer required fear. The vehicle stopped near the gate, and out stepped Marcus Vega, dressed in his worn leather jacket, scarf wrapped tight around his neck. The Latino man's dark hair had thinned a little more, but his grin was the same mischievous flash that had carried him through too many dangerous nights. "Morning, cowboy," Marcus called. "Heard you built an empire out of coffee and conscience?" Jack chuckled. "Better than my last job. Nobody shoots at me here." Marcus looked around, taking in the house, the woods, the dog dozing by the porch. "Not bad, brother. Not bad at all." His gaze softened when he spotted Emma. "You must be the famous Emma Carter. Your dad would have been proud." Emma smiled shyly. "Thank you, sir." Marcus crouched beside Shadow, scratching behind her ear. "And this old lady's still around? Guess even dogs know when they've found heaven." "She's family," Jack said simply. Marcus nodded. "That's what this place is, a family. You did good, Jack." When Marcus left later that morning, the cabin fell back into quiet. Jack walked to the fence line, hammering in the last wooden plank of the new barn he'd been building. Not for himself, but for the next group of children the foundation would take in. There were names already on a waiting list: a boy from Oregon, twin sisters from Texas, all orphans of soldiers whose stories had been forgotten until Jack dug them up again. As he worked, Emma came running with a piece of paper fluttering in her hand. "Uncle Jack," she called, a title that had appeared naturally between them. "Look, I drew us." He took the paper and smiled. The drawing was crude but full of life: a man, a girl, 3 dogs, and a house under a giant sun. In the corner, a small caption read, "Home." Jack swallowed the lump in his throat. That's pretty accurate, he said. Emma grinned. Except you don't smile that much in real life. He laughed, the sound deep and unguarded. Maybe I'll start practicing. When the sun climbed higher, the forest shimmered with melting frost. Shadow's puppies tumbled over each other in the snow, and Emma's laughter rang out like bells. Jack leaned against the porch post, watching them. The seal insignia on his old badge glinted faintly in his pocket, catching one last ray of morning light. He whispered to the wind, as if speaking to a friend long gone. You saved lives, Daniel. Now we'll keep saving what's left. The breeze answered in rustling leaves, soft and endless, a soldier's lullaby over a home finally, at peace. In the end, this story isn't just about a soldier or a child. It's about the quiet miracles God still performs through human kindness. Sometimes he doesn't split seas or send thunder from heaven. Sometimes he simply sends the right person at the right moment, a helping hand, a warm meal, a place to belong. Jack, Emma, and Shadow remind us that even in a world scarred by loss, grace still finds a way to bloom in the snow. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who still believes in hope. Leave a comment about your thoughts and subscribe to our channel so these stories of faith and compassion can reach more souls. May God bless you, protect your family, and guide your path through every storm you face.